It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today is my new verified co-host, Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, what's going on, sir?
I am verified that it is verified that I am on Twitter. In case there was any doubts before, I am very on Twitter, very online, as they say. But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be getting a week closer. I mean, we are. What is it, Marcus? We're like less than about 3 weeks. Just about 3 weeks.
3 weeks away from actual football stuff.
It's unbelievable. I'm excited.
It's unbelievable. All right, so today we're going to continue with our training camp preview. We're going to be talking about tight ends, and this is an episode that I'm really excited to get into because I think we might have some disagreements on how we view this tight end room.
Excellent.
I want to start with the group as a whole. I think it's a pretty good unit, right? Obviously, Dalton Schultz played well in Jarwin's absence last year. Jarwin is expected to return. You have
I can already see the setup. I can already see the setup happening here, Marcus. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Jeremy Sprinkle, a veteran tight end to come replace Blake Bell, and then you've got two guys from Michigan fighting for that fourth spot, and Nick Eubanks and Sean McEwen. So overall, what do you think about this tight end room going into the season?
I like it. I mean, obviously, I've been a big Dalton Schultz fan since he got drafted because I felt like, and we've talked about this before, I thought his skill set coming into the league was kind of almost opposite of what you see a lot of modern tight ends come in with, right? He had the kind of requisite athleticism to be a receiver, but he didn't have a ton of receiving skills. What he did have was a lot of experience in kind of doing the dirty work of being a tight end, the kind of the blocking, but he's a little bit undersized, but he has really good technique. And then as he's developed, he's kind of learned through experience how to kind of play the other aspects of the job, which, like I said, are things that tight ends mostly are coming into the league learning. I mean, nowadays the tight end position is more of a receiving position than it probably ever has been at any point. And the guys coming out of college kind of reflect that. But for a guy like Schultz who came in with some of those skills because of the fact that he went to Stanford, and Stanford kind of teaches a pro style of offense that really uses their tight ends heavily. He came in with a lot of that experience, and then once he got some snaps in his receiving part of his game kind of caught on. He became a really useful player down the stretch, and I think that he kind of comes into this year with more experience and more, having seen a lot more of what happens in the NFL, having been a starter for this team for almost the whole year. So I feel a lot better than I even did last year. I think you have a guy in Jarwin, you've got a guy in Schultz that can give you a viable option with two tight end fronts. Maybe you're not like, chomping at the bit to get CeeDee Lamb or Gallup off the field, but you also feel like if you need to deploy a two tight end set, you're going to have quality players out there.
Well, you can't run those guys 75 snaps a game. Your three receivers, they're going to need breaks, and plus you want different looks. There's going to be games where, yes, I know the three receivers are so good, but it's going to be better for your offense to play, let's say, 40% of the snaps in two tight end sets, right? If you're going against a really small defense, I think that can be valuable. So I want to start with Jarwin, Landon, because I think this one's very interesting, right? I think everybody assumes that he's going to be the starting tight end. What do you expect from Jarwin this season?
Well, I expect Jarwin to be the kind of guy who can feast on what's around him. I mean, I think that's really going to be the measurement of success is he going to be the kind of guy who can take advantage of the opportunities provided to him from guys like CeeDee Lamb and Gallup and Cooper on the outside. I think it's hard to deny that. I mean, even number one Schultz fan over here, it's hard to deny that a lot of what you saw with Schultz last year was opportunity provided by the rest of the offense around him. I think that Jarwin is a more capable wide receiver, more dangerous with the ball in his hands. And I think that, as far as a seam buster, as a guy who can get up the field and kind of find those soft spots in the zone, he presents a big target. He's athletic. He's a guy who I would expect, with a full season or hopefully close to that, to put up numbers, surpassing what we saw with Schultz last year. A little bit closer to. A little bit closer to 700, hopefully, maybe over 700 yards receiving. I think that there's going to be a lot to go around here, and there's going to be a lot of attention on the guys all around Jarwin. So as long as he can kind of just make the most of his opportunities, as long as he can kind of convert those opportunities into catches and play with a lot of efficiency, he's going to be able to put up big numbers just because there's going to be so much opportunity for him to get the ball.
Yeah, so Jarwin's game is all about making plays down the field and after the catch, right? Like the game that sticks out to me is the one against the Giants where he scored 3 touchdowns, right? And almost all of it was after the catch. I do think that in terms of like explosiveness, Jarwin is going to help the other receivers more than what Schultz will, right? Because Jarwin is the kind of guy that you might have to, not necessarily build your whole game plan around, but he can be really, really dangerous if you're just going to put a smaller safety on him or a slower linebacker. Like he is going to kill those guys. My problem is a couple things. Number one, how healthy is he? Because he hasn't practiced yet at all this offseason. This is somebody who tore his ACL in week 1. You would think that he'd be healthy by now, right?
Yeah, I think that one of the surprise names that we saw, with training, with a mini camp and OTAs of guys, we had obviously a laundry list of guys coming back from injury. But the fact that Jarwin, who tore his ACL pretty early in the season, wasn't back yet was a little bit surprising to me, for sure.
What, September 12th, I think, is when he tore it?
It's a pretty long time at this point for an ACL. ACL injuries are not what they used to be, right? They're more of a 8 to 10 month injury as opposed to 12-month, 13-month injury like it used to be. Jarwin's body type is different than a lot of these other guys. He's a bigger, taller guy, so that's contributing to him. Maybe there's a setback that they're not discussing. Maybe he's just right on the precipice of being ready, and they didn't want to rush him back because what's the point, right? And they have a guy in Schultz that they feel like they can execute practice,
If we get to camp, though, and Jarwin isn't practicing or is going every other day, that's when I'm going to start getting concerned.
Yeah, because that seems the timeline seems weird there, and it definitely would lend to the idea that if he's not back by that point, then maybe there's something going on there with the injury that he hasn't quite fully healed yet.
The other thing with Jarwin, and again, I really like Jarwin's talent. I think he can be one of these premier wide tight ends, right? That just gobbles in a bunch of passes and makes plays after the catch. It's just, does he offer you anything as a blocker? Like, is he a complete zero there? And we don't really know, because I think last year we were excited to see, okay, did he get better as a blocker from the previous season? And we wanted to see what it looked like in week 10 versus week 1. And by week 17, we just don't really know. And my problem is if he's going to basically be a zero or a liability on the field as a blocker, then I'm not so sure if the Cowboys are going to be wise to put him on the field instead of Dalton Schultz.
Well, that's a valid point. And I think that, Schultz to me has always been the superior blocker. And Schultz has gotten better, too. That's the other thing. Is Schultz has continued to kind of get better as he's gotten stronger. I think that there's something there. And look, I think that Schultz has earned the right to get snaps, to see the field, whether that's in a more heavy rotation than we kind of were expecting with Jarwin, or in, like we've mentioned, 12 personnel. I think that either way, Schultz has shown you that he has value as a two-way tight end that maybe Jarwin doesn't quite have. But then again, Jarwin provides things as a pass receiver that Schultz probably won't ever get to as well.
All right, I want to get to Dalton Schultz in just a second, but I want to tell you guys about Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing, and you can track all the action on Bet Online. Before the next pitch, head over to Bet Online on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Landon, my thinking here with Dalton Schultz is this. I think he should be the primary tight end, and Jarwin is the guy that comes in 12 personnel. And it really has nothing to do about Jarwin. I think it's more to do about Schultz, because the player that I saw last year, I thought was really good. And I know there was some, he's not the most dynamic player after the catch. I know he's not as flashy as Blake Jarwin, but he's gotten better as a blocker. He's only 24 years old. I think he's pretty reliable. Like he just doesn't drop a lot of passes. And if you want to if you want to be unpredictable a little bit on offense, especially when you have your three receivers on the field, I just think Schultz is the best combination of a guy that helps you in the passing game as well as the run game. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Schultz actually presents a pretty interesting question for the Cowboys this year, because I'm pretty sure, maybe you should check this. I'm pretty sure he's a free agent after this year, because this is the last year's rookie contract. Cowboys are going to have an interesting decision to make with him, because tight end is a position that we've discussed. It's a difficult position to draft. It's a difficult position to develop. The Cowboys have frankly developed, it seems like, half the tight ends in the league at different points, because they've drafted them and then they've played out and been pretty good. They've had innumerable number of good, solid to good tight end 2s and tight end 3s that have kind of dispersed throughout the league. I think the Cowboys really need to consider what they have in Schultz. And I think that there's something to what you're saying. I mean, I haven't really considered it, up until now, because Jarwin is just such a superior receiving talent. But there's something to what you're saying. There is something to the idea that Schultz has earned an opportunity. Schultz's presence on the field definitely doesn't maybe tip what's happening in the same way that Jarwin does. And I think that you're going to have a decision to make at the end of this year. Do you really want to let another well-developed tight end walk away when the guy that you have is very good receiving talent, and you certainly aren't going to be upset with him, but you're not necessarily replacing him with his with a solid two-way tight end that has value in the NFL still. So I think that after what we've seen with Schultz last year, Jarwin, for all the hype and all the excitement we have about his potential, Jarwin still hasn't put up a season like Schultz did last year. No. And that's a lot of that's opportunity, of course, and the injury is unfortunate, but at the same time, that's something to keep in mind. It's not like Jarwin is so much a sure thing that we should bypass what we do know we have in Schultz.
So I think Jarwin made a lot more sense of this Cowboy team in 2018 and 2019 when you were looking for guys to be dynamic on offense.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
When you had Amari Cooper for half the season and you had a rookie Michael Gallup and you needed somebody else to create explosive plays, Jarwin did that. And I think that he's very good at that. And I still think you can have a role for that player. But with the guys that you have now on offense, the three receivers, the two running backs, what you need from the tight end is somebody who can do a lot of jobs well and do a lot of different things, whether that's lining up as a fullback, lining up as an H-back, lining up in the slot, lining up in line. I just think Schultz does all those things better than Jarwin, even though I think Jarwin's strength is maybe stronger than Schultz's best strength. Does that make sense to you? I mean, I just think this team needs a complementary tight end more than they need a receiving tight end who is a little bit of a weakness as a blocker.
If we're picking generic team depth chart, right, I definitely would pick Jarwin, because Jarwin has receiving skills that are, highly regarded across the league is what you're trying to get. But for the Cowboys, like you're saying, who already have all this receiving talent all over the place, they're already going to have trouble distributing the ball, to the talent that they have. They may get more bang for their buck from a two-way player, like you're saying, from a guy that's not tipping off what they're doing, who can give you something in the run game when you want to hit them with the run. I can certainly get behind that theory. I mean, just because Jarwin is providing something that is not a huge need for the Cowboys on offense because they have that. Maybe it becomes a huge need if Gallup becomes injured or if Cooper has a turf toe and you want to have one more receiving threat on the field to kind of continue to spread teams out. But up until that point, when you've got Cooper, you've got Gallup, you've got Lamb on the field, you don't necessarily need a world beater receiver to be effective as your fourth target, right? Like he's going against their third linebacker or second safety or whatever. And Schultz can win that way. And then on top of that, Schultz can also give you something as a blocker that obviously Jarwin can't. So I definitely can get behind that thought process. The way that they deploy all these guys is going to be an interesting topic.
I just feel like this is very similar to the conversation that we had about running backs last week, where I'm good with Ezekiel Elliott being the battering ram, and then you bring in Tony Pollard for the explosive plays, and maybe the split is 60-40. I kind of think that's the way we should treat tight ends. Like maybe if it's 3rd and 9, okay, I'm good with having Jarwin in there instead of Dalton Schultz just because he gives you more athleticism. But on 2nd and 3, give me the guy that can do a little bit more than just run down the seam. So I'm really curious to see how the Cowboys use these tight ends. And maybe it'll just depend on the game, right? Maybe it's going to depend on the opponent. Maybe it'll depend on who's healthy.
The side of the field. The Cowboys had problems at times getting into the end zone.
That's where Jarwin is good.
Yep,
yes,
exactly.
Jarwin is very, very good in the red zone. It's a great point. All right, let's take one more quick break so I can tell you guys about Built Bar, the absolute best tasting protein bar out there. It's hard to even explain it. Real chocolate with amazing flavors. It's just a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste absolutely fantastic. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get $10 off your next box at BuiltBar.com. Also, check out our friends at Rock Auto. RockAuto.com is a family business serving auto parts to customers online for over 20 years. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. The RockAuto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brand, specifications, and prices that you prefer. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, Landon, let's talk about these other tight ends on the Cowboys team. Jeremy Sprinkle, who they signed from Washington, probably the 3rd tight end. What are you expecting from Sprinkle this year?
Yeah, Sprinkle's a guy who traditionally played a bunch of special team snaps for Washington. So he's definitely going to have a heavy role in that sense. He'll probably play on all the punt coverage teams, on the kick, field goal, all those teams. So he'll definitely get a lot of play as a special teamer if he ends up being the 3rd tight end, which is not surprising. He definitely has experience. He's played at different points, more or less, over the last years. For Washington at different spots. He's never really been, more than a tight end 2 for them at any point, even with injuries. So I think he's kind of just a utility guy that can come in. He can block a little bit. He can play on special teams. I don't think you're featuring him as a receiver if he's out on the field, but I mean, he can do what you need. And really it's going to be kind of, I honestly think if anything, it's more just kind of competition for a guy like Sean McEwen, who they probably would prefer to win that tight end 3 role.
I actually watched some Jeremy Sprinkle over the weekend. A lot of his snaps, he's like an inline blocker. Yep. Sometimes they use him as an H-back. To compare him to like Blake Bell, I think he's significantly bigger than Blake Bell. I actually think he's a better blocker, but Bell is more athletic. I think he's better on the move. You can actually use Blake Bell in the passing game a little bit. He's just more athletic after the catch. Sprinkle's just not that guy. I think he's when you think of a 3rd tight end, it's Jeremy Sprinkle. That's honestly the best way that I can describe it.
He's a blocking.
I think he's fine. Yeah, he's a blocking tight end. I think he's fine. Yeah. Sean McEwen is really interesting because I see him very similar to players like Dalton Schultz when I saw in Stanford, right? Like somebody who has the technique, that has the requisite athleticism. He just has to get a whole lot stronger. But the fact that he made the team last year, as the fourth tight end at least tells you that the front office likes him a little bit.
And he played too.
He
got into the game a couple of different times. So yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think the Schultz comparison is apt, right? Where there's a willingness and a technique element there to blocking that is you don't see a ton with these guys coming out of college. So yeah, but he's undersized, so he needs to get stronger to kind of help.
Well, is it easier to take a tight end that's undersized and bulk him up, or to teach a tight end how to have the correct technique to block?
Exactly. And I think that the Cowboys have discovered that it's probably easier to bulk them up, right? If you got a guy who understands angle, who understands leverage, who understands how to block and shield and get in the way as a blocker, and use their body, you just have to teach their body to be able to survive all that in the NFL, and then they'll be exactly what you're looking for. And I think that's kind of been the MO for the Cowboys is, okay, you guys go take all those first and second round wide receivers who put up huge numbers in college. I mean, look, the Kyle Pitts is incredible and will be an incredible tight end. But not every tight end is that you draft in the first round is Kyle Pitts, right? A lot of times they are guys who come in on inflated offensive numbers because of the offense that's being run in college, because of the matchups, and then they get into the NFL and it's not as easy as it was. You're asked to do a lot more. These are the guys the Cowboys draft that are used to doing the dirty work. They're used to having to wear multiple different hats. That's not going to scare them. Now all they have to do is kind of continue to do that, but spend more time instead of that classroom time at Michigan, learning about business. You need to get into the weight room and get down to business.
Yeah, and I like Sean McCool a little bit. It wouldn't be surprising to me at all if the Cowboys move on from Dalton Schultz after this year, maybe pick up a 4th or 5th round compensatory pick, and McCool kind of slides into that role. Well, here's the thing: they can't get out.
You're right. Totally.
They can't
that's
get
what
out
they
of Blake
do every
Jarwin's
year, right?
contract. Right.
Yeah,
they can't get out of Blake Jarwin's contract next year at all, really, without them costing money. So they're not going to move on from Jarwin. They probably don't have the cap space to pay 2 tight ends. I think this is their eventual replacement for Dalton Schultz, and I'm hoping that we see him take a big step. And listen, we didn't get to see McEwen at all really in training camp last year. No preseason games. I think they have 4 preseason games the Cowboys do this year. That's going to be huge for somebody like McEwen. I think he can really get better by the time we get to the end of the season, and I think he's going to need all those reps. Last guy I wanted to mention, Nick Eubanks. Very different from Sean McEwen, same school though. A big athletic guy who can make plays after the catch, needs to work on the blocking part of it. But does Eubanks have a chance to make this team?
This is kind of more the traditional type of tight end that gets drafted, right? Like he has some receiving abilities, an athlete, doesn't have the technique that you need, doesn't have the kind of reps playing the tight end position that you need, right? He's a heck of a character guy from what I understand. Like everybody in Michigan loves him, and he's a grinder. It's weird because it just feels like we saw a lot of snaps where I saw him not taking the play off, but more just kind of unsure of what his assignment was or not finishing. So I tend to think that this is kind of the more developmental down the road guy that you try to figure out different roster mechanisms to keep him on your team for a couple of years, because this is a guy who probably isn't ready to see an NFL field for at least a season or two. Right, like that, he just needs technique.
He needs 2 years on the practice squad.
Yeah, look, this is par for the course for a lot of these tight ends. It's an incredibly difficult position to learn. So guys like this who need technique work and to kind of just learn the position, they need multiple seasons before they're going to be ready to get onto the fields.
Do you know what's funny though is the way that the NFL values his guys is all over the board. Like I can think of the kid the Texans drafted a couple of years ago, Kahale Warring, who really didn't know the tight end position at all, goes in the early 3rd round, hasn't played at all yet, and now we're wondering if he's even going to make the roster. Nick Eubanks played at Michigan, same type of athlete, and he goes undrafted. So I don't know why the NFL values some of these guys super highly and then some of these guys not, but I do agree with you. I think Eubanks is an interesting developmental guy. You don't want him to play this year. You want to see him just get better in training camp in the preseason, stash him for 2 years, and maybe that's a guy who eventually replaces Blake Jarwin once Jarwin's contract's up. I don't know, but he's not. I think it's somebody we definitely have to keep an eye on.
You know, I think the Cowboys have been good and bad at certain positions and kind of, you know, finding talent, developing talent, and identifying talent is a huge part of it, right?
Sure.
I think the Cowboys are one of the best in the league at finding tight ends. I mean, they just seem to understand the position and what they want from the position. You know, that maybe not at you know, as defensive back or some of these other positions, but tight end is one position that, you know, for a long time the Cowboys have drafted. Right? Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys have drafted, developed tight ends as well as any team in the league.
So like Martellus Bennett didn't work out necessarily in Dallas, but he had a great career in the NFL, right? Yep. Lasted a long time, was part of a couple different Super Bowl teams. Anthony Fasano was still in the league just until a couple of years ago. Obviously, Jason Witten, Blake Jarwin, Jeff
Swaim. Jeff Swaim went off to another team.
He's still on teams right now. So yeah, you're right. I mean, they've got a lot of different guys that have been solid contributors. So I would not be surprised if one of McEwen or Nick Eubanks is the next developmental tight end for the Cowboys that ends
Dalton
up
Schultz,
working out.
Dalton
Schultz.
Yeah, exactly. So
there's a lot of value in finding that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. Is what the Cowboys need to do a better job here with tight ends is finding a way to extract value from these guys if they have to leave. You know, the comp pick formula is going to help with that. But it would be nice for them to find a way. You know, look, you talked about the contract with Blake Jarwin, and this is how we can finish. You know, maybe they like Schultz enough that they can trade Blake Jarwin. If they can show enough of Blake Jarwin, you know, his contract's not debilitating. If he really kind of shows that he's, you know, puts up big numbers, especially in an offense where he's going to get a ton of opportunity, there may be trade value because there's just not a ton of tight ends in the league.
Especially if like a star tight end goes down, like heaven forbid, like Travis Kelce goes down to Kansas City and there's nobody else in that team and they want somebody who can catch the ball down the seams and make plays after the catch. I could see Kansas City flipping a late round pick for Blake Jarwin and taking on that contract, right? Like that makes sense. So not a bad idea. I don't expect the Cowboys to do that, but it certainly is an option that they have. That is it for today's show. I love talking about tight ends. I think this is a really fascinating positional group for the Cowboys. And I'm interested to see how it all plays out. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. He's verified now, so make sure you guys do that. You can check out the show on YouTube. You can check us out Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Continue to download, support, give us some reviews on iTunes or wherever you give your reviews. We'll be back on Tuesday to answer your Twitter questions, so make sure you guys send them in to us.